So I came out to get my car the other day. It'd been sitting for a while. I figured it'd be a good idea just to start it up. I noticed wrench light come on the dash, and I can hear the fan running under the hood. So I plugged in my Blue Driver OBD2 scanner, read the codes, and the main one that stood out to me is P0713 transmission fluid temperature sensor A circuit high, which basically means the transmission fluid temperature sensor, which is internal to the transmission, is not sending any data. Basically a break in the wiring, or the sensor just went completely bad. In that case, it defaults to the cooling fan running on high. So before I freaked out too bad, the thoughts of having to drop the transmission pan and change the sensor, thought I'd do a visual inspection under the hood. All right, so I start looking around, start looking at the wiring. All of these sensors obviously end up back at the PCM, so I start looking at the PCM, and almost immediately I see right down here all the black tubing has been chewed through, and there's at least a couple of wires that are completely missing, about an inch or so right there. Well, the one that really stands out is a gray with a red stripe wire. So I pull up a wiring diagram and I see that that is a signal return wire for a bunch of different components on the vehicle, but one of them being the transmission temperature sensor. So bingo, something has been under the hood chewing on my wiring. So this obviously is not a new problem, since the day, probably the first day, any cars that had any kind of wiring on them, rodents have been chewing on the wiring. Many people will argue that in around 2000, when manufacturers started using soy-based wiring coatings, it really added to the problem, because instead of using petroleum-based wiring coatings, which worked great, they started using a soy-based coating, which is basically like putting food all over the wires of your car. In some cases, this causes, upwards of $20,000 damage when you get a squirrel or a mouse or a rat under the hood chewing on a wiring harness that has to be replaced. So hopefully, in my case, it's kind of hard to access this, but I'm going to have to cut off a lot of this loom, figure out exactly which wires are damaged, and then see if I can splice in some wiring, because I really don't obviously want to replace this whole harness here. So the question then is, how do we prevent this from happening again? There's no real way to completely prevent it. There's a bunch of products on the market that they claim, oils and, pellets and things you can stick under the hood. I'd say it's just kind of like trying to prevent a catalytic converter thief. Make it as hard as possible to chew in the wires. So obviously, like this right here, everything's really exposed. If we could try to cover this up a little bit. Rodents have to chew on things to keep their teeth worn down, so they're going to look for things hard to chew on. But if we give them something that they don't want to chew on, it may help. So my plan is going to be, I'm going to try to fix those wires. Once I get them fixed, I'm going to cover them in this lovely petroleum-based liquid electric tape. It's highly flammable and disgusting. Hopefully that alone would keep them from chewing. Then I'm going to be employing another product that seems to have mild success. So Honda came up with a very specific product to address this issue. It is a electrical tape that you wrap the wiring harness with, and it contains capsicum, basically pepper, or like the same thing you'd find in like mace or OC. So when they try to bite into that coating, it's an extremely hot pepper that is supposed to discourage them from chewing on the wires. So I'm going to make the harnesses kind of like, at least the one that got chewed through. I'm going to put new lube on it, and the last thing will be I will wrap it in the tape, and then I will try to cover up all these other areas with some tape like that also, kind of like, like what we have here. And I'm just going to get it as close as possible. All right, so here is the tape. It's just like electric tape. So at $50 a roll, got definitely not going to waste it. And just for good measure, I'm just going to put some of this on these other connections as well. All right, so I just went around and taped up what I thought were some sensitive spots. Certain wires, if they got chewed through, wouldn't be hard to fix. Certain wires would be, like the one that I already had an issue with here that I fixed. So I just kind of put it in areas, where the wiring, especially the soy wiring, was exposed. So does it actually work? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. A lot of people say it works, so that's why I bought it. It's better than doing nothing. So I'll have a link in the description where you can buy the tape. Just convenient if you want it. Like I said, it's about $50 a roll. So let's hope it works. If you have any experience with this, please share in the comments your experience, especially if you've used this tape and if it worked or not, especially if it didn't work. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.